Hello, this is day 96 of reading one canto of the Divine Comedy every day. We're on Paradiso, Canto 29, which I'll read from the Longfellow translation before giving some quick comments. At what time both the children of Latona, surmounted by the ram and by the scales, together make a zone of the horizon, as long as from the time the zenith holds them in equipoise, till from that girdle both changing their hemisphere disturb the balance, so long, her face depicted with a smile, did Beatrice keep silence while she gazed fixedly at the point which had overcome me. Then she began, I say, and I ask not what thou dost wish to hear, for I have seen it where centers every wen and every ubi. Not to acquire some good unto himself, which is impossible, but that his splendor in its resplendency may say, subsisto, in his eternity outside of time, outside all other limits, as it pleased him, into new loves the eternal love unfolded. Nor as if torpid did he lie before, for neither after nor before proceeded the going forth of God upon these waters. Matter and form, unmingled and conjoined, came into being that had no defect, even as 3 arrows from a 3-stringed bow. And, as in glass, in amber, or in crystal a sunbeam flashes so, that from its coming to its full being is no interval, so from its Lord did the triform effect ray forth into its being altogether, without discrimination of beginning. Order was concreated and constructed in substances, and summit of the world were those wherein the pure act was produced. Pure potentiality held the lowest part, midway bound potentiality with act such bond that it shall never be unbound. Jerome has written unto you of angels created a long lapse of centuries, or ever yet the other world was made. But written is this truth in many places by writers of the Holy Ghost, and thou shalt see it if thou lookest well thereat. And even reason seeth it somewhat, for it would not concede that for so long could be the motors without their perfection. Now dost thou know both where and when these loves created were, and how, so that extinct in thy desire already are 3 fires. Nor could one reach, in counting, unto 20 so swiftly, as a portion of these angels disturbed the subject of your elements. The rest remained, and they began this art which thou discernest, with so great delight that never from their circling do they cease. The occasion of the fall was the accursed presumption of that one, whom thou hast seen by all the burden of the world constrained. Those whom thou here beholdest modest were to recognize themselves as of that goodness which made them apt for so much understanding, on which account their vision was exalted by the enlightening grace and their own merit, so that they have a full and steadfast will. I would not have thee doubt, but certain be, 'tis meritorious to receive this grace, according as the affection opens to it. Now round about in this consistories much mayest thou contemplate, if these my words be gathered up, without all further aid. But since upon the earth throughout your schools they teach that such is the angelic nature that it doth hear and recollect, and will, more will I say, that thou mayest see unmixed the truth that is confounded there below, equivocating in such like prelections. These substances, sent in God's countenance they jocund were, turned not away their sight from that wherefrom not anything is hidden, hence they have not their vision intercepted by object new, and hence they do not need to recollect through uninterrupted thought. So that below, not sleeping, people dream, believing they speak truth, and not believing, and in the last is greater sin and shame. Below you do not journey by one path philosophizing, so transporteth you love of appearance and the thought thereof. And even this above here is endured with less disdain than when is set aside the holy writ, or when it is distorted. They think not there how much of blood it costs to sow it in the world, and how he pleases who in humility keeps close to it. Each striveth for appearance, and doth make his own inventions, and these treated are by preachers, and the evangelist holds its peace. One saith that the moon did backward turn in the passion of Christ, and interpose herself so that the sunlight reached not down below. And lies, for of its own accord the light hid itself, whence to Spaniards and to Indians as to the Jews did such eclipse respond. Florence has not so many Lapii and Bindi as fables such as these, that every year are shouted from the pulpit back and forth, in such wise that the lambs who do not know come back from the pasture fed upon the wind, and not to see the harm doth not excuse them. Christ did not to his first disciples say, Go forth, and to the world preach idle tales, but unto them a true foundation gave. And this so loudly sounded from their lips, that in the warfare to enkindle faith, they made of the evangel shields and lances. Now men go forth with jests and drolleries to preach, and if but well the people laugh, the hood puffs out, and nothing more is asked. But in the cowl there nestles such a bird, that, if the common people were to see it, they would perceive what pardons they confide in. For which so great on earth has grown the folly, that, without proof of any testimony, to each indulgence they would flock together. By this St. Anthony his pig doth fatten, and many others who are worse than pigs, paying in money without mark of coinage. But since we have digressed abundantly, turn back thine eyes forthwith to the right path, so that the way be shortened with the time. This nature doth so multiply itself in numbers, that there never yet was speech nor mortal fancy that can go so far. And if thou notice that which is revealed by Daniel, thou wilt see that in his thousands number determinate is kept concealed. The primal light that all irradiates it, by modes as many is received therein, as are the splendors wherewith it is mated. Hence, inasmuch as on the act conceptive the affection followeth, of love the sweetness therein diversely fervid is, or tepid. The height behold now, and the amplitude of the eternal power, since it hath made itself so many mirrors, where 'tis broken, one in itself remaining as before. Beatrice answers another question of Dante's, but we're not really told what the question is, just the answer, and it's broadly speaking about angels and their origin. First of all, the angels were not created centuries before the creation of the world and mankind, that it was all basically at about the same time. Time didn't exist before the creation of the universe. God is outside of time. He pre-exists it. Again, that's another time word, pre-exist, but, creates time. But he himself is not bound by time. Dante is saying that angels were created at about the same time as the rest of us, as the rest of mankind and the world. Next, Beatrice says, also, there are some who say that angels have understanding and will and memory, but that's not so. All they do is look at God, and they don't have to look anywhere else, and they know everything they need to know just from looking at him. And you may be asking yourself, what is all this theological mumbo-jumbo, this angels dancing on a pin? What's going on here? And what Dante's doing is actually, he's disagreeing with a number of theologians close to his day. Thomas Aquinas believed that angels are possessed of memory, and yet Dante says, no, they're not. That wouldn't make any sense. In that particular example, I think it's probably a distinction without a difference. Does the angel know what it needs to know by remembering, or does it know what it needs to know by looking into the mind of God? Doesn't really matter. It knows, right? And in saying that angels were created close to the same time as the rest of the world, Dante's contradicting St. Jerome, which Beatrice acknowledges. Now, are these points of dogma or serious doctrine? I don't think so. I think Dante's free to disagree so long as angels are still able to do all the things that the scriptures show them doing, right? But this is the process of theology, of starting with a first base assumption that is known to be true, that God exists and the Bible is his word, right? You start from that, and then you philosophize. You use philosophy, you use reason to discover, just by thinking, really, and praying, okay, well, in that case, what else must be true by necessity? Step by step, proof by proof. And in that way, theology is no different than any other school of thought, at least the way the other schools of thought should be, except theology has for its subject much higher things. But then at the end of that diatribe, Beatrice's next speech almost goes right back against Dante's opinions that are expressed here, because she says, look, some people like to show off how smart they are by philosophizing about the scriptures, and they can't even keep to one track of thought, that they want to show, oh, well, look at this connection, without bringing it into one point that they're trying to make. And then she also says, But this is not nearly as bad as those who just kind of put aside the scriptures entirely in their preaching. And now she's calling out priests, pastors, whoever. If you've ever heard a bad sermon or a bad homily, this chapter is for you. Beatrice talks about how you should not be just putting in jokes and stuff and trying to make the congregation happy and make them laugh with you, right? It is supposed to be about getting them to heaven, which means you must be preaching the truth of the gospel that people bled for to spread. So on the one hand, in this chapter, Dante expresses his opinions about certain theological points and disagrees with great saints in the process. Is he right or wrong? I don't know. And on the other hand, he has Beatrice say, well, that stuff doesn't really matter as much as getting the core message correct. And she implies that many priests at this time were not even doing that. That's all for today, though. I'll see you tomorrow.